What's going on, everybody? C4 here today, continuing with my NFL predictions for the upcoming 2017 NFL season. Just around the corner with training camps and preseason coming. Oh, football season is back. Thank God. I was getting sick and tired of just playing that shitty-ass Madden game every day. Now we can talk about football, and we've done predictions. We've done NFC East. We've done all of the AFC, so if you're a fan of one of those teams and haven't checked that out, make sure you go do that so you can get mad or happy with what I have to say. But today we're going to be looking at the NFC North, and what we're going to do is going to rank all the teams from 1st through 4th and how they're going to finish in their division, as well as going through each individual team briefly and looking at some key points, if you will. As always, if you agree or disagree with anything you see here, please feel free to be civil in the comment section below, and we'll talk it out. We'll hash things out. So looking at the NFC North, we're going to start from number 4 and work our way all up to number 1. We're going to give their regular season prediction record as well as giving them a ceiling or floor. So I'm going to try, even if I shit on your favorite team, I'm going to try to give them some upside and just act like what could they do potentially if everything turns out right for them. So at number 4, we're going with the Chicago Bears, who I think the record is going to be 4-12. I think their ceiling is 6-10. I don't see much more than a 6-10 team. I still think they had one of the worst draft classes I've ever seen on paper. On paper, the worst thing you can do is say it's going to be the worst draft class you've ever seen on talent-wise and then get burned in the ass. Because certainly Trubisky probably was the highest-rated pro-ready quarterback, I guess you could say, in this year's draft class. And they went out and got him. I got that. I just didn't like the move because I do think Mike Glennon can be a serviceable starter. I didn't really get that move. But Trubisky can pan out. Shaheen, I guess maybe we could all be wrong about Shaheen. He does have the height, weight, speed kind of attributes that he could be good. There are some good picks from the draft. I like Tariq Cohen. I liked Eddie Jackson, the safety from Alabama. But all in all, it was a very weak draft class for the Bears, I think, as it stands right now. At least how much I think they're going to have an impact on them right now. So 4-12, looking at their schedules, about where I feel they will be. Their MVP for me this year will be Jordan Howard once again because they're going to have to run the ball a lot. Even though they do have, a new quarterback at the helm, that team is still going to have to run the ball. They have a decent offensive line. With Kyle Long, Josh sitting at the guard spots, White, Cody Whitehair is the center. So the interior is good interior push that helps that run game. I think Jordan Howard has another strong season. Bust, I'm going Prince Amukamara just because I know there is, the jury is still in on Kyle Fuller if he's going to be able to replicate the kind of production he had his rookie year. So they brought in Prince Amukamara here, cut from the Jags. Seems like almost like a mercenary to, single-handedly be the #1 corner there now. He's listed as the #1 corner. I just don't see him being that guy. I think he's the kind of guy that can be a good member of a collective unit rather than the standalone guy that's going to improve that secondary by himself. Not necessarily, not by himself, it's Prince Amukamara and no one else. But he's not going to be the guy that's going to spearhead, making other players around him better in the secondary. And I think that's kind of what he's been brought into, at least looking at their secondary depth chart on paper. The sleeper for me is going to be Mike Glennon. I think Mike Glennon is going to have a decent year. Not a spectacular year because if you only get 4 wins, you obviously didn't do anything wrong. But I think Mike Glennon is going to have the best quarterback season, I'm going to say, over the last 3 years. I think his final stat lines will be better than anything Jay Cutler or who they have last year. They had fucking Matt Barkley and Brian Hoyer. Pretty much the 49ers quarterback situation last year and Jay Cutler. Take last year Jay Cutler that he actually started and what they had last year, and I think Mike Glennon statistically will be better than those. Look at the first round pick, Mitchell Trubisky. He maybe will play a little bit sparingly near the end of the year, so I'm going to say 1,200 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks in probably 3 games. He'll probably see the field 3-4 games. Look at the strength of the Bears team. It will be the run game, and the weakness for me is the wide receivers. Cam Meredith's not bad. You got a bunch of just pieces that have fallen out elsewhere. Marcus Wheaton, Kendall Wright, Kevin White. All those nothing really there is solid. So uncertainty at the wide receiver spot makes for me that biggest weakness. Going to number 3, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings, finishing with a 6-10 record. I definitely am kind of shitting on the Vikings here a little bit because they're ceiling. I'm only saying 7-9, maybe 8-8. I'm not seeing a whole lot there, to be completely honest with you. And it all comes down to the offensive line. They tried to throw a lot of money in at this offseason. I don't think they did enough. Riley Reiff and Mike Remmers were the 2 guys they brought in, and they paid a lot of money. They paid near top-tier tackle money for 2 guys that are serviceable. Looking at, that's pretty much it. I think the O-line is still very bad. there in Minnesota. They were one of the worst offensive lines last year. They're at points. They were rivaling the Seahawks in terms of offensive line performance. I know that a lot of people think that TJ Clemmings is the worst offensive lineman to ever step foot in the NFL. I still think that's Eric Flowers, but I digress. Look at the Vikings, the MVP for the season. I think this will be Danielle Hunter. I think he's going to have another monster year. I'm going to say, 12, 13 sacks, maybe even more, because he got 12, 13 sacks. He was a rotational defensive end. I think if he becomes an every down starter, opposed Everson Griffin, I mean, you can't keep having Brian Robinson starting. You need to have Danielle Hunter, who's probably the freakiest defensive end, I would say, right now in terms of age and everything like that. You got to give him just full snaps. Give him a full snap count. I think he's a guy that can get 15 sacks. So he's going to be my bold prediction for MVP. For bust, I'm going to go with Latavius Murray just because, he really succeeded last year with Oakland. And even some people, even his stat line, people are still saying he wasn't that good because he couldn't make anyone miss after contact. It was because the Raiders' offensive line was so good. Now he's going to a team in Minnesota, the offensive line not so good. I don't want to completely shit on the two acquisitions of Reef and Remmers. Those guys are solid, but they're not going to be enough to game change this terrible offensive line into a good one. It probably made them just slightly better. So the level of offensive line play that Latavius Murray has gone from and now is going to is going to be drastic, and I think a lot of people are going to be like, He's not Adrian Peterson, which we all know, but it's going to be, even more stated once you see him play. Which goes to a sleeper, which is going to be Dalvin Cook. And I know Dalvin Cook's not really a sleeper, but technically, everywhere you're looking, he's behind Latavius Murray on the depth chart, and I think it's only going to be a matter of time until Dalvin Cook is the starter there. I'm not a big fan of Dalvin Cook. I definitely think he was solid. I just never really thought he was... I always had Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette ahead of Dalvin Cook, and then debatably Joe Mixon. He was still top 5 running back in this year's draft class, went where he should have been, in my opinion. I think he should have been high second-round pick, definitely not a first-round talent back. But just so it doesn't sound like a cop-out because it's not really a sleeper. I know a lot of Viking fans are kind of hyping up Dalvin Cook. I'm going to go Jaleel Johnson on the defensive line. Currently listed as a depth guy. I would not be surprised. It was Shrift Floyd and Tom Johnson. I think he might get the starting gig about week 6. Gets him in there. He's really, really good against the run. Look at the strengths of the Vikings. I'm going with the front 7. I think as a whole, the front 7 is still fairly good. You got Linval Joseph, Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. That's pretty goddamn good front 7. Their corners are really good. Really, their defense is really well-rounded for the most part. The weakness for me is offensive line. Offensive line's terrible. Yeah, 6-10 for the Minnesota Vikings. Going to number 2, it's going to be the Detroit Lions. I have them as 8-8. They're going to be one of the fringe wildcard teams in this year's NFC race. I have a ceiling of 10-6, which is higher than the Philadelphia Eagles, who I gave a what was my ceiling for the Eagles? 7-9. So even though I had the Eagles getting a wildcard spot, I think at the Lions' highest point, they can fleece the Eagles for that wildcard spot. Looking at them, though, their MVP is going to be Matt Stafford. I know, again, it's easy going with the quarterback as the MVP, but really looking at that team, it's going to have to be Matt Stafford if they want to make another playoff push. With his, hopefully there's not so many fourth quarter comebacks because a lot of the times it was Matt Stafford playing terrible in the first half, which made him have to kind of come back in the fourth quarter. The bust for me is Amir Abdullah. I don't see anything really there. I mean, even when he got drafted, I was like, he's all right. But looking at right now that backfield, I think Theo Riddick and Zach Zenner, I would definitely have both of them higher than Amir Abdullah on the running back depth chart. I think Theo Riddick obviously can't run between the tackles as good as well, but he's not bad. As a guy that's had Theo Riddick for multiple years in fantasy, I've watched it when he was a lone back. He wasn't that bad, to be completely honest with you. I think he can't, I don't know if you want to outright say he's going to be our day 1 3-down back starter, but I definitely think he's a guy you can mix in there and not just have him come in on 3rd and longs or clear passing situations. And I really do think, if you tell me right now, gun to my head, Zach Zenner is a better running back than Amir Abdullah. He looked really, really good down the stretch for the Detroit Lions. They have a decent offensive line last year. They lost some of those pieces, and now they have a really, really bad injury this season with Taylor Decker, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I definitely don't think Amir Abdullah is going to amount to much this season. For sleeper, I'm going Kenny Golladay, the wide receiver, rookie from, I always mess up where he's from, Northern Illinois, I believe is where he's from, or he's from the Wolf Pack. I don't, like I said, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember just watching the combine, watching the wide receiver drills. He stood out to me. This guy here, ripped, big, height, weight, speed type player. They needed that. They needed another guy that they can go and get the ball. And, especially with how Marvin Jones kind of died off down the stretch last season, they need someone else to make plays, consistency behind Golden Tate. And I definitely think that a guy like Kenny Golladay is going to have a decent rookie season. I think he's going to be one of my sleeper wide receivers because it's the right situation there in Detroit. They're looking for another guy that can make plays at the wide receiver spot and give him some action. I think that will be Kenny Golladay. Look at their first round pick, Jarrad Davis. I predict it's one of two things. Here, I'm going to give a stat line and what I think might happen. What I think might happen is that even though he was incredible at Florida when he was on the field, injury prone, and I think he probably will suffer an injury prone week 6, week 7, and miss some time, which would suck. But if he does play, he's going to be a beast and a low-key shot at winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. I was saying 110 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. He's a big-time tackler. I don't think he's going to get much in terms of pass deflections or interceptions, but he is an all-in-out, old-school middle linebacker that can get after the quarterback if you bring him in on some blitz packages. So I think he will be definitely, like I said, low-key in the discussion for Defensive Rookie of the Year if he stays on the field. And then finishing out the NFC North here at the first place spot, we have the Green Bay Packers, who I think will go 12-4 in a ceiling of 13-3. I saw 13-3. That's the highest record we have given so far. We gave that to the Patriots. I think the Packers and Patriots are the two most overpowered teams coming in. I think the Patriots are definitely a little bit more well-rounded, as the Packers still need to shore up some things and prove that their secondary is better than what it was. But offensively speaking, I think the Packers have the most explosive offense in football. And that is without a run game. I think throwing the ball right now, it is just absolutely insane. Their offensive line is very solid. So look at the Packers MVP, Aaron Rodgers. Kind of like the Lions, it's kind of a cop-out to go with the quarterback, but I think Aaron Rodgers, I honestly think going into the season, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady for the MVP. Those are going to be my short list to start things out. Looking at the bust, I'm going to go with Ty Montgomery just because I think teams are going to figure it out. They're like, okay, he's not really, doesn't really have the vision of a running back. You saw that multiple times last season. Even though he had, like 2 good games as a running back, you could just see he doesn't have that natural vision behind the line of scrimmage to pick out the right holes. He was just more so taking advantage of a blown play by the defense. So I think he's going to get kind of outed as a running back. Also, I'm going to put in brackets Aaron Jones because fuck that guy. For the sleeper, I'm going Jamal Williams. I know a lot of people are kind of, if you talk about sleepers in the NFL, his name is popping up a lot just because so many people are expecting Ty Montgomery not to pan out at running back, to move him back to wide receiver, and then Jamal Williams, a more natural pounder of the ball from BYU, will be the new starter. I think that will be the situation. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on for your fantasy football teams is Jamal Williams, because you can probably get him real late, and I think he probably will eventually be the starter there. Looking at the strength of the Packers, it's obviously their pass attack. Aaron Rodgers. You have Ty Montgomery, who's going to be classified as just a weapon. You got Martellus Bennett, Richard Rodgers, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, Geronimo Allison, Jeff Janis. You get Malachi Dupree in the 7th round from LSU. There's just a whole lot going on there. And their weakness for me, obviously, you have the secondary. There's still some question marks over that. Even though they did draft Josh Jones and Kevin King, you still have to say, until proven wrong, their secondary is pretty weak. But I'm going to go and say their defensive line. Outside of Mike Daniels, they get Christian Ringo, Kenny Clark, Montravius Adams. I see a lot of just, uncertainty there against the run. I think they're going to struggle against the run. That's pretty much what I'm going to say, because their 2 linebackers are Clay Matthews and Nick Perry coming off the edge. They're not spectacular against the run. Those are guys that usually get after the quarterback, and rightfully so. But I just think this defense as a whole is going to struggle against the run if they're going to struggle anywhere. So maybe that's giving a little bit too much credit to their secondary, that they're going to be able to shut the guys down. But I think when you're playing the Packers, you're going to want to try to establish the run, which has been the mantra really over the whole Mike McCarthy era. We'll say the Aaron Rodgers era. The Packers have always struggled against the run. They weren't so bad last year, but I think the defensive line, in my opinion, is looking pretty thin for the Packers, at least in comparison to the rest of their roster. So there you go, guys. Those are my predictions for the NFC North. As always, if you agree or disagree with anything you heard here today, feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below. If this is your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. Smash the like button if you enjoyed. Until next time, C4 saying peace out.